Good morning. My name is Bill Zariello from the Solid Training Unit of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and welcome to Basic Excel Formulas and Formatting Everyone Should Know. Microsoft Excel is the industry standard spreadsheet application, and it has a vast range of tools that help you organize, format, manipulate, and analyze data within worksheets inside of a workbook. This is a quick overview of some basic Excel formulas and formatting that may be of use for every type of Excel user. If you accessed this video through the Learning Management System or the LMS, there is a link to a documentation file that covers all the functionality I will be showing you today on the launch page for this video course. You could also use a little thing known as the internet to look up additional materials on the web. There's a variety of different documentation copies out there, or you can use the help feature directly inside of the Excel application itself. Much of what I'm going to be demonstrating for you today is covered in more detail in both Excel Level 1 and Excel Level 2, which is offered through our Learning Management System or the LMS. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a simple monthly budget spreadsheet for the past year. And this is going to help us demonstrate some basic Excel layout techniques that will help all users who are accessing your workbook, some basic Excel formatting and some basic number formatting, and some basic Excel formulas and functions that are useful on an everyday basis. We're going to make Excel do the work for us so that we don't have to update individual cells all the time through the use of formulas based on the data that we enter into our spreadsheet. We're also going to learn how to help troubleshoot some of the issues we may encounter and how to protect the final product once we're done and we want to share this spreadsheet with others so that they don't enter data in a cell that we have a formula in and it wipes out our formula. Now, it is not all inclusive, but it is a very good starting point for at least getting our feet wet in Excel. We will create a monthly budget worksheet for this year based on last year's data, and we'll analyze how much money we should have been able to save each month for retirement. Once we're good with the performance of what's happening with our formulas, we're then going to lock and protect the spreadsheet and the formulas while unlocking only the data entry cells. And we're going to make it a template so we can share a copy of this spreadsheet with others for them to use with their own data. We're going to properly create the worksheet, lay out the data itself, and talk about some web accessibility concerns along the way. And then we're going to add some basic formulas and functions quickly and easily to do the calculations for us in the least amount of time. All right, so let's begin by opening up our sample workbook. In it, you see that we have two worksheets down here labeled Sheet 1 and Sheet 2. We have the menu tabs across the top and the corresponding ribbons for each one of those menu tabs with all the corresponding functions along there. We also have our columns are denoted by letters going across the top, and our rows are denoted by numbers going down the left-hand side. Our cursor starts in A1, and you see that because it is highlighted in green, and then it also is referenced as A1 in the cell reference in the box above. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to rename the sheet tabs down at the bottom. For web accessibility to help those that are using a screen reading device for limited sighted or blind users, they're going to use the device to read the sheet names along the bottom as a table of contents to locate the sheet with the pertinent data they may wish to use. So we want to make sure that the sheet names are meaningful, not just monthly data, but it says January 2021 data, and then remove any blank sheets that we may not have in use in this particular spreadsheet. So I'm going to double click on sheet name, which is sheet 1, and it highlights that information, and now all I have to do is type and it will automatically replace it with the title of the sheet name I want to put in there, which is 2021 budget. I click anywhere into the worksheet again, and it accepts my name that I've put there, and I'm going to remove sheet 2. I'm going to do a right click on sheet 2, down at the bottom on the sheet name, choose delete, and it removes it right from this particular workbook. If I need to add worksheets back in, I can go ahead and use the new sheet button here to add in new worksheets as necessary, but you don't want to leave blank ones in there. Now we want to begin entering data, and we want to start in cell A1, as screen readers will start reading cell references and data back to a limited sighted or blind user starting there and going left to right until the end of the data, and then it starts on the next row. So I single click to select A1. If I double click, it puts me into data entry mode. Or if I wanted to enter data as well, I could type right into the formula bar, which is right here. In my data entry mode, I am going to type in the title of my particular spreadsheet here that I want it to have, and it will be household budget. I'm going to click anywhere outside of that cell to accept it, or I can click the check mark to accept the data that I've entered there. Notice that my data goes from A1 into B1, but if I click into cell B1 and select that, there is no data physically entered there. It's just overlaying on top of B1. If I do enter data into B1, that data sits on top of A1, but it doesn't remove the extra data that would overlay on top of it. I'm going to go ahead and select that and hit my delete key just to bring us back to A1 again. I want to go ahead and highlight and format some of the items that are in this household budget. I could do it physically by selecting it here and choosing any of my font information. I could go into the cell itself and select anything and do any of my font information, or I can select the cell once and then everything inside of that cell will be affected by what I choose on the font. So if I choose bold, if I choose to make it blue, and if I choose to make it 16 point, everything in that cell is there, and then I click outside of it to accept all my information. Now, when we're laying out and formatting information, it is best not to have any blank rows separating your data. Sometimes people will separate their January data from their February data from their March data using a blank row. This can signal to a screen reader as they go over it that they have reached the end of their data, because that entire row will be read back to them as blank, 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 blank. And they may think it's the bottom of the table, not just a blank separator row. It's also best not to have blank columns inside of a particular spreadsheet, or merged rows or columns. So if you merge this into one cell instead of two, this will throw off the understanding of how that data may be laid out for anybody who is using a screen reader. If they assume there are 5 columns, they are assuming 5 columns worth of data in every row going underneath. And it's also best not to have random blank cells throughout your spreadsheet. You can add zeros into that, or an NA if that's possible, because even for a sighted viewer, this tends to look, if it's a random set of blanks, that something is wrong with the data layout. And it may also interfere with Excel when it is trying to select or summarize data for you. However, if you are leaving any blanks in the cells, or starting somewhere in the spreadsheet other than A1, you can put instructions for those using screen readers as white text to sit on top of the white background. This won't interfere with any of the sighted viewers who may be looking at your spreadsheet, but the screen readers will have that text read back to them and alert those users as to where pertinent data may reside. For example, if I was not going to use B1, C1, D1, E1, F1, G1, H1, I1, J1, K1, and then I'm going to put my salary information in L1 for the heading and M1 for my data, I want to put something in B1 that I may want to enter all in white text that says cell B1 through K1 blank. Salary data in L1, M1. And that will be read back as the contents of B1. None of my sighted users see it at all, but my non-sighted users and blind users using the screen reader will have that information read back to them. All right, so let's assume we're going to put in our net pay or our salary. So for example, I'm going to use the salary amount of $50,640 a year. So I said I was going to put it into L1 as my header. I'm going to do some formatting on that. I'm going to select that cell, make it bold, blue, and also make it 16. And then next to it in M1, I'm going to enter the salary amount, $50,640. Now the system doesn't know what that number is. It doesn't know if it's currency as in money. It doesn't know if it's accounting as in assets and deficits. It doesn't know whether or not it is a 5-digit zip code. It's not sure what it is. So we are going to want to set a numerical format on that. So I'm going to change the numerical format on this from just being a general format. I can drop it down and choose currency. But if you notice, right underneath it is accounting. And they look almost the same. So I'm going to choose currency first for this particular item. And I'm going to put in the exact same amount next to it as an example and choose accounting on that one. This $ here is for the accounting number sign, not the currency. And I'll show you how sometimes that throws people off. First off, if I'm doing currency, I could increase or decrease my decimal points by selecting my cell and saying maybe I don't want any dollars and cents, I just want it to be in dollars. I can decrease that or increase it. Now I'm going to spread out this column. I'm going to widen it slightly by putting my cursor in between M and N, and it changes from a large white plus sign to a two-headed black arrow. And I'm going to hold down my left mouse key and drag it slightly to the right. When I do that, notice that my dollars and cents still is right aligned. My decimal is there, my thousandths separator is there, and my $ is directly up against my dollars. With the accounting, I'm going to do the same thing. Put my cursor in between N and O, hold down my left mouse key, and slightly pull over to the right. And notice what it does. It is not directly right aligned. It also has my $ left aligned. Accountants like things neat and clean. And because they're not sure whether or not 59 after the decimal point is going to be the exact same width as 11 right after the decimal sign, they leave enough room for the numbers to be placed, but all their decimal points will line up. Not necessarily everything will be lined up right aligned. They also throw the $ over to the left, so all the $ line up, whether they're talking about $1.75 or $175.75. Their $ will always be left aligned, neat and orderly like a ledger. So, you may inherit somebody's spreadsheet. You want to make sure they have used the proper numerical formats that you want. If things are not quite lining up, check the numerical formats or the formats in place. They may not match all the way. Now, I want to put my salary information here inside of this box for a specific reason. I want to use salary as part of my calculations, but I don't want to hard code this number, 5640, inside of the formula. Because if my salary increases, I have to remember I have to go into all the formulas where I've used my salary and change the number in each one of the formulas. I want to use it here so I can create formulas that will reference whatever is inside of this cell to be used as my salary. And that way, when I get a salary increase, it goes in here. All my formulas will automatically update for me. So next, let's add our categories. I've collected expenses on particular items, and I've gathered them into a spreadsheet that I will reference. So I want to put those same categories into this spreadsheet here. So in A2, I click into it. It's been selected. I'm going to go ahead and start to type in my category headers. I know that I'm going to have something on rent or mortgage, depending on whether people are renting or mortgaging. I'm going to go into A3 and type in food expenses. A4 is for gas or transportation. Because not everyone has their own car. They may be using light rail, or they may be carpooling and paying for gas for people. Fun, because everyone needs to have a fun category. And then oops, because there's always unforeseen expenses. So when we take a look at these, one of the items that comes up is here's my categories here. I'm going to select all of them. And I clicked in my first cell and then held down my left mouse key and dragged down to the last cell. I could also click into the first cell, and as long as it's continuous cells I want to include, I can hold my shift key and click into the last cell, and it will select all those items in between. I'm going to make sure they're all bold, just so they stand out a little bit more from the data that will be entered. And you'll notice that some of them are running into the subsequent cells afterwards. So I want to make sure that I leave enough room for my entire cell to be read without covering any of the data that may be in column B, or having B cover something that is in column A. If I put my cursor in between A and B, I could automatically resize column A to be as big as the largest piece of data within column A. I place my cursor over that separator between A and B, and with the two-headed arrow showing, I double-click. And when I double-click, it resets itself to be the largest width for any of the piece of data, which includes my title. Now, I may not necessarily want it to be as big as the title as well. I'd like it to at least be as wide as gas transportation. So I'm going to put my cursor on top of A and B separator again, wait for it to be a two-headed arrow, and then slightly drag it over to the left. And it resizes, but leaves A without collapsing into underneath B1 again. So we can go ahead and resize those very quickly. Auto resize it just by double clicking right on the separator between the columns, or clicking and dragging that separator wherever we want it to be. So let's add our monthly column headers going across the top. Now, if you take a look at it, I haven't left any room here to put some column headings above my categories. I put the categories right up against the title, so it's a little too tight. So the first thing we need to do is insert a row. So I'm going to take my cursor and put it in the rows indicator on top of the 2 where I would like to insert a row. It turns into a black arrow pointing to the right, and I'm going to click once to select that entire row. I'm going to do a right click on that and choose Insert from the shortcut menu. When I choose Insert from the shortcut menu, you notice that the thickness of this row doesn't look like the ones below. It actually looks like the ones above. And it has this little paintbrush indicator right underneath it. What I want to do with that little paintbrush indicator is drop down the small arrow next to it to see the options. Right now it is set to format the row that I just inserted the same as the row above, which is blue, bold, and 16 point, which I don't want. I really want it to format it the same as the row below, so that it's going to be 12 point, it's going to be bold and black like those categories below. Or I could completely clear the formatting and start a whole brand new set of formatting if I wanted to. I'm going to choose Format Same as Below. Go ahead and click OK. Now if I start to type in my months, the first thing that happens is my month is now on top of my categories, and that's not where I want it. I really want it to start next to that particular one. If I select that cell, it's selected in green. I'm going to put my cursor on the edge of that cell itself, and it turns into a 4-headed arrow. And I'm going to go ahead and click and hold down my left mouse key on that and drag it over to B2, which is where I would like to have that data entered. So now with January in there, each one of these columns should denote a month. I entered January, and I could type in February, March, April, May, and go all the way across to December. But Excel has a preset list and different types of lists that's already in use as part of its autofill feature. It has things such as months of the year, days of the week, Numerical data, if you start with 1, 2, 3, and start dragging those, it will then go 4, 5, 6 and count out for you. You could do every Monday of the week. So it could be 1/7/2022, 1/14/2022, and then you click on that and drag it out. It will realize you're starting a pattern of every Monday weekly, and it will go ahead and drag that out for you as well. With the cursor there, I'm going to go ahead and place it in the lower right corner where that little green square is, and the white cursor will turn to a dark black plus sign. I'm going to click on the left mouse key and hold it and just drag it over one. I haven't released it, but it will tell me that if I release it, it will put February into that particular location for me. Now, if it's going to put February in there and I continue dragging over, it's going to put March in the third one, April, and I'm going to continue and drag it all the way out until I get to December and release. And it adds in, using the autofill feature, the months of the year for me. If I continued past December, it would start over January, February, March as it goes. Now, one of the items that I see in here, I have it selected all the way through. I can do some very quick formatting on this as well. The first thing I want to do is I would like to center each one of these in the columns. And because I have those particular items there, I know that it looks like September's slightly cut off, November's really tight, I've got a little bit more room with some of the other ones. I'm going to select just the monthly columns, January through December. And what I did was I put my cursor on top of column B. It became a downward facing black arrow, and I clicked and dragged all the way over to December. With all of that selected, I'm going to resize all of just these columns as the same width for each one. I want to make them at least as wide as September should be. So I'm going to take the column separator between J and K, which is the column separator between September and October, and I'm going to slightly drag it out to the right. Just a bit to make enough room for all of September, the heading, to appear within that column. It resizes all of my months to be exactly the same widths for every single one, and each one can fit nicely within the heading. And I will click anywhere to finish. So as I said before, I have previously gathered all the data from 2021, and I'm going to use that as my sample data when I'm creating my formulas to make sure that everything is working properly. I've collected all that information, I've put it on its own spreadsheet, and then I hid that spreadsheet within this workbook. So in order to unhide a spreadsheet that may have been hidden, I'm going to do a right click on my sheet tab at the bottom, and it gives me an option to unhide. If I have any hidden worksheets, they will be listed here, and I'm going to unhide the one for data, budget data numbers, and that information appears. It's laid out the same way that my new spreadsheet is, so when I paste it in, I shouldn't have to redo anything. In order to copy this information, I'm going to copy from B2 to M6. I can do a couple of different ways for copying this information. I can select B2 and hold down my left mouse key and drag over to M2 and then down to M6, and it will select everything between. Or I could select B2, hold down my shift key, and then select the last cell that I want to include, which would be M6, and it selects all the continuous cells within that range that I've selected. With it selected, I have a couple of ways that I can copy this information. I can use the copy button right on the ribbon. I can do a right click and use copy right off of my shortcut menu, or I can do a Control and C together on my keyboard, and it will copy that information to my clipboard, and you can see that it's copied by that dashed line all the way around. I'm going to click into the budget that I want it to go into. I'm going to place my cursor inside of the January, which is where it was at the start of the piece that I cut, and I can either paste it in, I can do a right click and I can paste it in using one of the options, or I can do a Control and V as in Victor and paste that information right in there. It's still selected once I paste it in. So with it all selected, I'm going to go ahead and do my numerical format for everything that I have selected. I'm going to shift it over from general to currency. And now it matches all the same formatting as my salary as well. I'm going to click anywhere to deselect the data that I've pasted in. And then I'm going to do a right click on that data budget numbers tab and hide this tab one more time. Now we're ready to start putting together our Excel formulas. Now you need to know that Excel works on algebraic principles in that it wants to do certain calculations in a certain order or follow the order of operations. It wants to do what's in parentheses first, then do exponentials, then do multiplication and division from the left to the right, and then addition and subtraction from the left to the right. In order to try and understand this order, it's probably best to remember this particular phrase. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, to represent do parentheses first, then exponentials, then multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. So if we follow this particular example that we have above, this formula here, in order to walk through it, we need to do what's inside of the parentheses first. So it's going to come down to 10 plus, do what's inside the parentheses first, 3 divided by 2 to the power of 2 times 4 minus 1. The next item we want to do in this is the exponential, which is 2 to the power of 2, or 2 squared. So we have 10 plus 3 divided by 2 squared is 4 times 4 minus 1. Now we're going to do the multiplication and division starting from the left and going to the right. So we're going to do 3 divided by 4 first, then whatever we get there, we're going to multiply that by 4. So we have 10 plus, we have 3 divided by 4, which is 0.75. We multiply 0.75 by 4, and we get 3 minus 1. And now we do our addition and our subtraction from the left to the right. So we have 10 plus 3, which is 13, minus 1, which is 12. If we didn't have the parentheses here, we would skip that, and our first step would actually have been the exponentials, and it would have given us a very different answer. Many times when you're doing things such as, I want to add these 4 items together, then divide it by the number of items, which would be 4, people forget to put those 4 items into parentheses to say, add them together first, then that sum I wanted to divide by 4. And what ends up happening is the system says, from the way you've written it without parentheses, I'm only going to divide the last item by 4 and then add the rest of the things to it. All right, so the next thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to be creating our formulas. And we can do this in many different ways. All formulas begin with an equal sign, and we can either type in the formula that we would like to use by hand. We could use a point and click cell reference, click on the cell we want to reference, and then add our mathematical function to it. Or we can even use some built-in functions that are directly in Microsoft Excel. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and label where we would like to put our formulas. They are going to be our monthly expenses. And my formula is going to be in B8 all the way through M8, and I would like to summarize the monthly expenses above. So in B8, I'm going to start by typing in an equal sign. And then I can go ahead and continue typing in the formula that I would like to use using mathematical symbols that are in the keyboard as we go along. We'll use the plus sign for addition. We'll use the hyphen for a subtraction sign. We will use the asterisk, which is above the 8, As multiplication, we'll use the date slash, which is underneath the question mark in the lower right corner. As division, we will use the up caret on my keyboard, which is above the 6, which is for exponentials. And then we'll use the parentheses on 9 and the 0 for an open parenthesis and a closed parenthesis. One thing to remember, equal sign always denotes you're starting into a formula. If you have an open parenthesis in a formula, Excel is going to want you to have a closed parenthesis for that formula. So if you have a very involved and complex formula with multiple sets of parentheses and you have 7 open parentheses, Excel is going to want to make sure you have 7 closed parentheses as well. That's usually one of the errors that will come up. So we've typed in our label, monthly expenses. We've put ourselves into formula creation mode by typing in an equal sign into B8. And notice that most of my formatting tools have gone gray because it knows we are in the process of creating an actual formula at this point. With the equal sign there, I am going to physically type in the formula that I want, which is to add the contents of B3 to B4 to B5 to B6 and to B7. So I'm going to type in the cell reference of B3. When I do B3 for B and 3, it recognizes that's a cell reference and highlights it for me. I'm going to put in the plus sign and I'm going to type in B4, put in another plus sign, type in B5, another plus sign, type in B6, last plus sign and type in B7. Now this is the formula that I want. Add B3 to B4 to B5 to B6 to B7. It shows my formula in the edit area of that particular cell, and it also shows my formula in the formula bar. To accept the formula, I can go ahead and click on the check mark here, or just hit my enter key. And now instead of showing me the formula in my spreadsheet, I can see that it's in the background. It shows me the sum of the information that I have there. And that's one way to do it. Put yourself into formula edit mode by putting in an equal sign and then physically typing in the formula that you want using the mathematical functions on the keyboard. To delete a function that you have in there, I'm just going to select that cell and I'm going to hit my delete key. When I do that, my formula disappears. Anything that's being summarized in that cell disappears as well as we go through. This is one of the reasons why it is so important, once you have your formulas created and tested, to lock your formulas or protect the cells so that no one can inadvertently delete your formula by mistake. Or another way to build that same formula. The equal sign puts us into formula creation mode, and now I'm going to use the point and click method. I know that I want to add up B3, B4, B5, B6, and B7. So the first thing I'm going to say in my formula is I want to choose B3. And I'm going to just click on it once with my mouse, and it puts the cell reference in there for me. I will type in the plus sign and click on B4. Type in the plus sign and click on B5. B6, and B7. And I'm going to go ahead and accept, this time just hitting my enter key. We get the same information there as we go through. So we can either type the formula in by hand, we could do the point and click cell reference as we go through as well. If for some reason I need to edit this formula, I need to go in and edit it directly in the formula bar or double click on that particular cell to put myself back into an edit mode. Know that anywhere I have my cursor right now, I have it in front of B4. If I click anywhere else, I'm going to be adding a cell reference, E11. If for some reason I go, no, I didn't want that, and I'm trying to get rid of it, and I'm starting to mess up my formula, and I'm like, oh, I didn't want that, I don't have to rebuild the whole thing. If I had an existing formula in there, I can click on this X, which is cancel all editing that I've done, put back in the formula I had there. It just drops it back into the formula that I had. So if you are in edit creation mode of a formula and you click anywhere else, you will be adding probably a cell reference. So if you do that, just cancel it and go back to the formula that you had in the first place. Now, the nice thing about having this formula created, and I'm going to be doing everything for January, then February, then March, this is what we call a referential formula. The referential formula refers to the function that's being done based on its relative position to the cells it's doing it to. So for example, in B8, I'm referencing all the cells above me in the same column B. If I click and drag this formula, which we can do, we can autofill formulas as well. I'm going to take the little autofill button down here. I'm going to put my cursor on it. The large white arrow becomes a thin black arrow, and I'm going to click and hold my left mouse key and drag it over 1. When I release it, notice that the answer is not the same because the formula is not the same. When I moved it from column B, it went from summarizing the cells above in B. When I moved it into column C, it now summarizes the cells above in C. It is referentially using the cells based on its position within the spreadsheet. Now, if I do this and go over to March, it also shows that it has changed from going from the cells in C to the cells in D, which means I can go ahead and autofill that formula all the way across, and it will referentially update based on its position within the cells in the spreadsheet. So the nice thing about that is I created one formula, made sure that it worked, and then I could autofill it across 11 other cells. So the next formula that I want to enter is going to be my monthly income. So I'm going to put my header for monthly income, and I'm going to create a formula that takes my yearly income and divides it into 12 equal amounts, and then put those in for the monthly income for each one of my months. To do that, I'm going to put my cursor in B9, and I'm going to type in an equal sign to put myself into formula creation. I am going to point and click on cell M1, the reference cell for where my salary is located, my yearly salary, and then I'm going to do the divide, which is the date slash, and then type in the number 12 for divide it by 12, or make this a monthly amount, not a yearly amount. And I hit my enter key. And it says that my monthly income based on my yearly amount divided by 12 will equal $42.20 a month. Now, because we have our autofill feature, we can go ahead and try and autofill that going across as well. I'm going to put my cursor on the lower right-hand corner. My large white plus sign becomes a very thin black plus sign. I'm going to hold down my left mouse key and drag it across to M9 and release. And it did not autofill. What I see here is I have M1 divided by 12, but when I dragged my formula from B to C, my formula changed to N1 divided by 12. As I moved it over one column, it assumed I wanted to now use the data that was over one column as well. And it did that with each one of them. Every time I moved over one column, it moved over one column in its reference. It is referentially referencing that particular location for the salary. What I have to do in this case is create an absolute formula, an absolute reference, which says I'm creating my formula in B9. No matter where I move that formula within my spreadsheet, don't referentially update my formula. I always absolutely want to go back to the cell that I am referencing. So in order to do that, I'm going to select M1 in my formula bar. With it highlighted, I'm going to press my F4 function key. And on my keyboard, I have to hold down the FN for function in the lower left and then press the F4 key at the top of my keyboard. And F4 turns that M1 referential into an M1 absolute. The dollar sign in front of the M says always look for column M. The dollar sign in front of 1 says always look for row 1. So it is absolutely referencing M1 every time. And now no matter where I drag this formula, so I'm going to autofill again. Every single one of these formulas always references M1 divided by 12. So now I'm able to do my monthly income using an absolute formula referencing that particular cell no matter where this formula is put. If for some reason you can't get the F4 key to work, you can always type the dollar sign in front of the M, type the dollar sign in front of the 1 in your formula bar, and then accept what you've done. Our next set of formulas, we're going to go ahead and come up with the possible monthly savings. So I'm going to put in my label, monthly savings. And in here, my formula is going to be very simple. I need to know of my entire income. I need to subtract my entire set of expenses for that month to come up with the remainder, which could have been possible savings. So my formula is going to be very simple. It's going to be a simple subtraction problem. It's going to be equals, put myself into formula creation mode, my income. I'm going to click right on B9, and I'm going to use the hyphen to do a subtraction and subtract B8, which is my monthly expenses. And I'm going to hit my enter key. So in the month of January, I had $32.58 for expenses, $42.20 for income, and ultimately I had $962 possibly left over for savings. Now, because this is a referential type of formula where I'm going to be referencing the numbers which are directly located above, I'm going to do an autofill. Put my cursor in the lower right corner, hold down my left mouse key when it changes to a thin black arrow and drag it across and release. And it updates referentially based on where the formula is located. It uses the same cell references referentially in the column to which it is moved. To take a look at this is something that comes quite often. You may end up having somebody else's spreadsheet sent to you. And they say, for some reason, it's not adding up correctly. For some reason, I don't think I have the formulas correctly. And it's too difficult to do this, to bounce around and figure out what the formulas are. So you can always use a control and tilde key. The control key is in the lower left-hand corner of my keyboard, and the tilde key is just underneath the escape key at the top upper left corner of my keyboard. And I'm going to press the control key and tilde at the same time, and it flips the view around. So now I can see my formulas very quickly and easily. So I can tell whether I'm missing a formula. I can tell whether or not a formula doesn't make sense as I go through. And then I can do control and tilde again to bring it back to the view that I want. Now I'm looking at this and the dollars are all even. So there's really no reason for me to have decimal with 2 decimal places on here. So I'm going to select my salary and I'm going to hold down my control key and I'm going to select the rest of my numerical data, which is showing as well. Holding down the control key allows me to click anywhere else in a non-continuous location and select more than one area. And I'm going to go ahead and use the decrease decimal function. Click on it once to decrease 1 decimal point, click on it twice, and now if I do have anything that is dollars and cents, it will naturally use the rounding function. At this point, I'm going to select any other cell to deselect everything that I have selected, and now I'm going to do a little bit of formatting on some borders to separate my data. Around the data that I entered, I'm going to go ahead and select that area, and I'm just going to put a box. A standard box, just the outside borders of that box. Along the very bottom of that box, I'm going to select that one row, and on the bottom, I want to go ahead and use a thick bottom border. And what that does is it just separates my data from my formulas below, and I want to do the same thing on monthly income. But I'm going to do a double bottom border. So it separates my formulas here from my potential monthly savings as I go through. Around my salary, I will also do just an outside border. This will help when I make this into a template that I'm going to unlock this data entry area and unlock the salary area as well and lock down all my formulas so they can't be overwritten. Now we will utilize some auto functions in Excel to help summarize our data over the entire year. So for example, in the N column and O column, I'm going to be putting together the sum of all the expenses across the entire year and the average expense across the entire year. So in N2, I'm going to put in my title, and I'm just going to put summary. In O, I'm going to put average. In N3, I would like to summarize all the data from B3 through M3. I could do that by starting a formula with an equal sign and pointing and clicking and adding them all together. I'm going to use the AutoSum feature up here, and this is an automatic feature that's already been pre-configured to do sums for you, averages, count numbers, give you the maximum value within a particular range or the minimum value within a particular range, or there are more functions that it could do that you could choose from. I'm going to go ahead and use the AutoSum. So I'm going to drop this down and choose sum. Because I've chosen sum and I'm letting the system create the formula for me, it automatically looks to the right, above, to the left, and below for data that it can use in the calculation. And it says that it has found data, and it's highlighted that says I am going from B3 through M3. B3 colon M3 is the range, which is correct. I would like to summarize all of my data from January, which starts in B3, to December, which is M3. And I will just hit my Enter key. And it shows that over the course of the year, I have used $24,000 just in rent and mortgage. Now remember that we have the autofill feature here. There is nothing that says I always have to absolutely go back to a particular point. So I could use the autofill feature to go ahead and do summaries for each one of my individual rows going down. I could also continue it into my monthly expenses. So I see what my expenses were for the entire year, my monthly income, so I can see that added up, which should add up to my yearly income, which is an M1, and ultimately on the bottom, my monthly savings, which should show me how much I could have possibly saved over the entire year. So I had an opportunity to save almost $7,700 during the course of the year. Now, on average, to do the same thing, I'm going to use my auto feature up here, and I'm going to use the average feature that's under here. I'm going to drop this down, and I'm going to just choose average. It puts in the equal sign for me, puts in the keyword average, and then it says, here's your range. Be sure to look at your range because, again, Excel is automatically selecting the data for you. It's looking to the right, above, to the left, and below. And if you notice, it's taking all of my data to the left, just like it did with sum. However, I have the sum in there as well, which means it's going to give me the average of all my numbers and the summary on top of it, which will possibly duplicate or double my numbers as we go through. So I don't want B3 through N3. I can either go in here and say I would like to change this to an M, and it shows you what it updated to, or, and I will show you this, if I do the same thing and let it select for me, B3 through N3 is already selected. If that's not what I want, I'm going to reselect B3 through M3 and release my left mouse key and hit enter. And it shows on average it's $2,000, which you can clearly see going across the 12 months. Because this is not absolute references again, I'm going to drag this down as well. I definitely want the average for all of my categories. I may want an average for my expenses. I may want an average for my monthly income, and I may want an average for my monthly savings. On average, I should be able to save a certain amount. So I could do all that. I should be able to save at least $600, almost $650 a month if I could do that. So it's nice to have that information down here. This last one that I want to show you is conditional formatting. It is sometimes nice to know how much the average is that you could roughly spend in a particular category. Most times you say, if I am going to be doing gas for the month, I should be staying at a $300 level or a $400 level. I don't want to spend more than that. So I'm going to use conditional formatting to populate and highlight individual data points in here which go over my $400 limit. I've selected my entire row of data for gas and transportation. I'm going to go to conditional formatting. Under conditional formatting, I would like it to highlight any cells based on this particular rule, that any of those cells are greater than, and I would like to change that number here, which it automatically says 350. I'm going to say 400. I allotted myself $400 a month for gas, but I do want to know when I've gone over that. And I will go ahead and click OK. So now it shows me that in February I went over, August, September, October, and November I went over. It did not choose January, May, or June because I chose to have it highlight anything greater than 400. If I wanted to change that, I could say that I would want to make it into something that is between a certain value, or there are even more rules that you can choose from. And one of them could be that it's not necessarily greater than, it's greater than or equal to. Now that I have my yearly total here, I may want to be able to share that with another worksheet within my same workbook, and I can do that very easily. I'm going to click on the plus sign to create a new worksheet. I'm going to call it yearly totals. Click anywhere into the worksheet, and then I'm going to put my title up here, possible savings. And I'm going to say that I did it for 2021. I could have next 2022. I could go down by year for each one of them. In the 2021, I could type in the number 7693. However, if I do that, 7693, I make it a number format. So I've got currency. That looks exactly the way that I would want it. However, if somebody updates any information within this worksheet for a valid reason, let's say that they forgot that there was an unforeseen expense in April of $300, and they update that information, it updates my worksheet properly, it updates my number here correctly. However, on my yearly totals, it does not update. This is seen as a static number. It's not a formula. So what I want to do is I want to put in a formula here that reads whatever the data is in this particular cell referenced and updates accordingly. So in yearly total, I'm going to go ahead and delete that information there. I'm going to put us into formula creation mode by typing in an equal sign. Once I type in the equal sign, I'm going to go down and click on the worksheet where the data is housed. You can see it's creating my formula up here by saying that in a single apostrophe, the 2021 budget, which is the tab name, and then I'm going to click in the cell where the data is that I would like to show, which is N10. Updates N10, and then I'm just going to hit my Enter key or click on my check mark. And when I do that, it brings me back to this particular cell, and it shows me that it's 73.93. Now if somebody goes into this budget, and let's say that in April, it wasn't $300, it was actually $30, and it was in there incorrectly. It updates all my information here to 76.63, and on the yearly totals, it's automatically updated to 76.63. One of the caveats to remember, if for some reason somebody changes the tab name here and they say that this is instead of 2021 budget, they end up saying this is my new 2021 budget, it still sees that because it's updated the tab name automatically. It's housed within the same workbook. It can update very quickly and easily. If you are trying to do this from one workbook to another, you are dealing with people moving that workbook because it needs to have the correct location, strict location every single time. You're dealing with people changing the tab name and it can't be read. You're dealing with people changing the name of the file overall or moving it from one shared drive to another. And it's going to break that link. Within the workbook, it works very easily. Across workbooks, there's a lot of issues. Now that we know that our formulas are working and our layout is proper, we want to go ahead and use this workbook as a template so other people can put their data in there and use our formulas to generate the same kind of information. In order to do that, we have to remove our data first. We then have to unlock the data entry cells we want people to enter their data into, and we have to lock our formula cells and our layout cells. So the first thing we want to do is I'm going to remove my data out of here. So I'm going to remove first my salary. I'm going to click on delete, and then I'm going to remove all of my data cells within the square where all the data had been pasted in. You notice all my formulas have gone to 0. All my average formulas have gone to, and it looks like an error message, $div/0. It's basically saying, according to mathematical reasoning, you cannot divide anything by 0. And because there is no data entered in here, it's basically saying you're dividing something by 0, by nothing. And you can't do that. This is an okay error to have because as soon as I start to enter in any data, it disappears. So now that I've removed my data, I want to make sure that these data cells are unlocked and the salary data cell is unlocked, and then lock everything else. By default, if I protected this worksheet, in the background, every cell would be seen as locked. It would be almost like I was making it into a read-only worksheet. So I have to tell the system what cells to unlock. Then when I protect it, it will lock all of the cells except for the ones I physically told the system to unlock. So for salary, I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to click in the salary field where I would like them to enter the information and drop down the format button here under cell and go down to where it says lock cell, and you see that it is highlighted because it is seen as a locked cell. I'm going to click on the words lock cell. And now when I drop that down, it does not have any highlighting on it, which means it is unlocked. The other area, I'm going to unlock all of my data cells here all at one time. Select them all, drop down the format button, click on Lock Cell to unlock them. Now, those are seen as unlocked, and everything else would be seen as locked when I protect my worksheet. I'm going to protect the worksheet by going down to Format again and go down and say Protect My Sheet. When I protect the sheet, it wants a password to unprotect the sheet. This is something you have to remember. The IT department is not going to be able to recover this for you. So I use something very general and generic that I use for most of the same ones that I do. I want it to protect my worksheet and contents of locked cells, and it will select the locked cells and select the unlocked cells, and everything else. That's about all that it can do on this particular one. They will only be able to enter items into the unlocked cells. They can select a locked cell, but they can't change anything. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It asks me to confirm once again what my password was that I'm using. And I click OK. Now, my particular worksheet is locked. So if I want to enter in my salary, let's say I'm making $32,548, it accepts that information for me. I can put in my data into each one of these items here. Remember, I still have the conditional formatting for gas, which says that I'm assuming that anything above 400 is going to be seen as red. So if you don't want that, you have to remove that conditional formatting. If I try and change any of my formulas, I know that my monthly expenses for January were $2,800. If I try and enter in $2,800, the system throws an error and says the cell or chart you're trying to change is protected. To make the change, you have to unprotect the sheet, and it's required using the password. So it doesn't allow them to change my formulas at all. They will always be calculating only based on the data that is entered above. So that helps me to protect all the information that I want to make sure I keep track of and make sure that my data is correct. So in conclusion, we used a budget spreadsheet to discuss standard formatting and formulas every Excel user should know. And we explained the essentials and how good formatting and standard formula creation allows Excel to do most of the work for you, not you. And by protecting your worksheet when you are completed, you are going to save yourself a lot of time troubleshooting deleted formulas or formulas that have been altered without your knowledge. So my name again is Bill Zariello, and I work with the Solid Training Unit. I want to thank you guys for all of your time and attention on today's power topic. And I hope that you at least got one thing from today's demonstration, and it proved well worth your time. Again, if you access this video through our LMS or our learning management system, there is a link to the documentation file that covers all the functionality that I just showed you on the launch page for this video course, and it walks you through step by step for working each one of these functions. If necessary, you can also search the LMS to locate the next scheduled sessions, either virtual or in person, of Excel's level 1, 2, or 3. We also have levels 1, 2, and 3 of Microsoft Word for more in-depth information on any of those applications.